What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected legends finally says enough is enough? In just 34 seconds, a single disrespectful comment brought an entire talk show crashing down, exposing the ugly truth about what really goes on behind those bright studio lights. But before we get into it, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because we're pulling back the curtain on Hollywood's dark side, exposing entitled celebrities and their shocking behavior the cameras never showed you. We've got the raw footage they don't want you to see, and you won't want to miss a single reveal. Drop a comment below and let us know what you think about this outrageous behavior. Now, let's get into what really happened that night. The studio audience was buzzing with excitement. Harrison Ford, the man who gave us Han Solo and Indiana Jones, was about to sit down for what everyone thought would be a fun, lighthearted interview. The band played him out, the crowd cheered, and Harrison walked onto that stage with his signature modest smile, waving to the fans who'd loved him for decades. Jimmy Kimmel stood there grinning, soaking in the applause like it was all for him. They shook hands, Harrison sat down, and that's when things started to feel off. Right from the very beginning, something wasn't right. "Harrison Ford, everyone," Jimmy said, spreading his arms wide. "The legend himself. You know, I've been waiting years to get you on this couch." Harrison gave a polite nod. "Happy to be here, Jimmy." "Yeah, I bet you are," Jimmy said with this weird smirk. "I mean, where else are you going to get this kind of attention these days, right?" The audience laughed nervously. Harrison's expression didn't change, but you could see it in his eyes. That comment landed wrong, but being the professional he is, Harrison just smiled and let it slide. "Well, I stay pretty busy," Harrison replied calmly. Sure, Jimmy said, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. "So let's talk about your new movie. I watched it last night, and I gotta be honest with you, Harrison, I had some thoughts." "Okay," Harrison said, waiting. "It's a little slow, don't you think?" Jimmy said, making a face. "I mean, I get it. You're older now. You can't do all those crazy stunts anymore. But man, there were parts where I almost fell asleep." The audience went quiet. You could feel the tension creeping into the room. Harrison Ford, a man who's done his own stunts well into his 70s, just got told his movie was boring by a talk show host who probably couldn't run a mile without calling his agent. Harrison took a breath. "Well, it's a different kind of film, more character-driven. Not everything needs explosions every 5 minutes." "Yeah, but that's what people want to see, you know?" Jimmy pressed on, not reading the room at all. "Action, excitement, not you sitting around talking about feelings for 2 hours." "It's actually 1 hour and 53 minutes, Harrison corrected, his voice steady but firm. Jimmy laughed like Harrison had just told a joke. "Oh, so you're counting the minutes now? That's funny. That's really funny." "I'm just being accurate," Harrison said. The audience didn't know whether to laugh or stay silent. This wasn't the fun interview they came to see. This was starting to feel uncomfortable. "So tell me," Jimmy continued, completely oblivious to what he was doing. "When you read the script, did you think, wow, this is the role that's going to remind everyone why I'm still relevant?" Harrison's jaw tightened. "I didn't think about it like that." "Come on, be honest," Jimmy pushed. "You're at a point in your career where you gotta take what you can get, right? I mean, how many more movies do you really have left in you?" And there it was, the line that shouldn't have been crossed. Harrison sat forward slightly, looking Jimmy straight in the eye. "I take roles that interest me, roles that challenge me. I don't need to prove anything to anyone." Hey, no offense," Jimmy said, holding up his hands with that fake, innocent look. "I'm just saying, you're not exactly the spring chicken you used to be. We all get old, Harrison. It happens." "Age has nothing to do with the quality of work," Harrison replied, his voice getting an edge to it now. Jimmy wouldn't stop. He just kept digging. "Maybe not, but let's be real. The action hero days are behind you. You're more like the wise mentor now, who shows up for 10 minutes and then lets the younger guys do all the heavy lifting." The audience was fully uncomfortable now. Some people shifted in their seats. Others looked at each other like they couldn't believe what they were hearing. But Jimmy just kept that smug smile on his face like he was winning some kind of game. "I've been doing this for over 40 years, Harrison said slowly, deliberately. "I've worked with the best directors, the best actors, the best crews in this business. I don't need a lecture from you about what kind of roles I should or shouldn't take." Whoa, someone's getting defensive," Jimmy said, laughing it off. "I'm just having a conversation here, Harrison. This is what talk shows are. We talk, we joke around. Don't take it so seriously." There's a difference between joking and being disrespectful, Harrison shot back. Jimmy's smile faded just a little. Disrespectful? Come on, man. I'm a huge fan. I'm just giving you a hard time. It's all in good fun. Is it? Harrison asked. Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like you've been taking shots at me since I sat down. Taking shots? Jimmy repeated, looking at the audience like Harrison was being ridiculous. Did everyone hear that? Harrison Ford thinks I'm taking shots at him. I'm just asking questions, buddy. That's literally my job. Your job is to make your guests feel welcome, Harrison said firmly, not to insult them on national television. The tension was thick now. You could hear a pin drop in that studio. Jimmy's face was turning red, and not from embarrassment, from anger. He didn't like being called out, especially not in front of his own audience. You know what, Harrison? Jimmy said, his voice getting sharper. Maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe the problem is you can't handle a little criticism. You've been in this bubble for so long where everyone kisses your feet and tells you how great you are. Well, newsflash, not everyone thinks you're the greatest actor who ever lived. Harrison just stared at him. I never said I was. You didn't have to, Jimmy snapped. You walk around with that attitude like you're better than everyone, like you're too good to be here. Well, let me tell you something. This is my show. My show. And if you don't like how I run things, there's the door. The audience gasped. Literally gasped. No one could believe what they were hearing. Jimmy Kimmel, the host, was telling Harrison Ford, the guest, to leave. Harrison didn't move. He just sat there, looking at Jimmy with this calm, steady gaze. You really want to do this? Do what? Jimmy challenged. Kick you off my show? Yeah, Harrison, I think I do. Because I don't need some washed-up actor coming on here and acting like he's doing me a favor. Washed up. He really said it. He called Harrison Ford washed up. The room went dead silent. Harrison stood up slowly. He didn't yell. He didn't make a scene. He just stood up, straightened his jacket, and looked down at Jimmy with the kind of quiet dignity that only a true professional could have in that moment. You know what the sad part is? Harrison said, his voice calm but cutting. I came here tonight to have a good conversation, to talk about something I care about, something I worked hard on. But instead, you use this time to try and make yourself look big by making me look small. And that says a lot more about you than it does about me. Jimmy opened his mouth to respond, but Harrison kept going. I've been doing interviews for 40 years, Jimmy. 40 years. And I've sat across from legends, real professionals who knew how to make their guests feel valued, how to make them feel heard. You're not one of them. You're just a guy with a microphone and an ego. The audience didn't know what to do. Some people started clapping quietly. Others just sat there in shock. And another thing, Harrison continued, his voice never rising but somehow filling the entire room. You want to talk about relevance? You want to talk about who's washed up? Take a look in the mirror, Jimmy, because attacking your guests, insulting them, tearing them down, that's not entertainment. That's desperation. Jimmy's face was bright red now. Get off my stage. I'm already leaving, Harrison said. I don't need to be told twice. He turned to the audience and gave them a small wave. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm sorry you had to see this. And then he walked. Just walked right off that stage, past the cameras, past the stunned crew members, and out of the studio. The whole place was buzzing. People were talking over each other, pulling out their phones, trying to process what they just witnessed. Jimmy sat there at his desk, frozen. His producers were frantically talking into their headsets. The band didn't know whether to play music or stay quiet. The whole show had completely derailed. Well, Jimmy finally said into his microphone, trying to laugh it off. I guess Harrison Ford doesn't have a sense of humor anymore. We'll be right back after this break. But nobody was buying it. The audience knew what they saw. The crew knew what happened. And most importantly, the cameras caught every single second of it. Jimmy tried to play it cool, but his hands were shaking. He took a sip of water and looked at his note cards like he could just move on to the next segment. But the damage was done. Harrison Ford, one of the most beloved actors in the world, had just walked off his show because Jimmy couldn't stop himself from being cruel. The assistant director was signaling to cut to commercial, but everything felt chaotic. Audience members were still whispering to each other. Some were recording on their phones, even though they weren't supposed to, and the energy in that room had completely shifted. When they finally cut to commercial, Jimmy ripped off his microphone and started arguing with his producers. You couldn't hear exactly what was being said, but you could see him pointing toward the exit where Harrison had left, throwing his hands up, clearly trying to defend himself. But here's the thing, there was no defense. Everyone saw what happened. Everyone heard the insults, the condescension, the complete lack of respect. And everyone saw how Harrison handled it with more grace and dignity than most people could have managed. One of the audience members later said that during the commercial break, Jimmy tried to make jokes about it, tried to get the crowd back on his side, but nobody was laughing. They came to see Harrison Ford. They came to hear stories about Indiana Jones and Star Wars and 40 years of incredible movies. Instead, they got a masterclass in how not to treat a guest. The producers were scrambling. They knew this was bad, really bad. They tried to convince Jimmy to apologize when they came back from commercial, to smooth things over, but his pride wouldn't let him. He thought he could just move on, crack a few jokes, and everyone would forget about it. He was wrong. When the show came back on, Jimmy tried to laugh it off. Well, that was interesting, wasn't it, folks? Harrison Ford, ladies and gentlemen. A real character, that guy. But the audience barely responded. A few awkward chuckles, maybe, but mostly silence. They weren't on his side anymore. They'd seen him cross the line, and they'd seen a legend walk away rather than put up with it. Jimmy stumbled through the rest of the show. His next guest, some young comedian, came out and tried their best, but the energy was gone. Everything felt hollow. The jokes fell flat. The banter was forced. Everyone in that studio knew they'd just witnessed something they'd never forget. Behind the scenes, crew members were already texting their friends and family about what went down. Producers were making calls, trying to figure out how to handle the fallout, because they knew, even before the show ended, that this was going to blow up. And the wildest part? Harrison didn't trash talk Jimmy to anyone. He didn't go on social media and complain. He didn't call up other talk shows to tell his side of the story. He just left. Because that's who Harrison Ford is. He doesn't need to explain himself. He doesn't need to fight back. His work speaks for itself, and his character speaks even louder. Jimmy, on the other hand, spent the rest of that night trying to control the narrative. His team was working overtime, but there was no spinning this. The video clips were already spreading. People were watching it, rewatching it, breaking down every moment, every insult, every dismissive comment. The audience that night went home and told everyone they knew. They posted about it online. They shared their experiences. And the consensus was clear. Jimmy Kimmel had disrespected a legend, and that legend had walked away with his head held high. What made it even worse for Jimmy was how Harrison handled himself. He never raised his voice, never called Jimmy names, never stooped to that level. He simply stated facts, stood up for himself, and left. That's power. That's real strength. And the thing is, Harrison didn't need that interview. He didn't need Jimmy Kimmel's show to promote his movie. He's Harrison Ford. People were going to see his movie regardless. But Jimmy needed Harrison. He needed that big name, that draw, that legendary presence to bring in viewers. And in 34 seconds, with one disrespectful comment too many, he lost it all. The crew members who were there that night said they'd never seen anything like it. In all their years working in television, they'd never seen a guest just walk off like that. And they'd definitely never seen their host so completely in the wrong. One camera operator said that when Harrison walked past, he had this look of disappointment on his face. Not anger, not rage, just disappointment. Like he expected better and was let down. And somehow, that was worse than if he'd yelled or made a scene. Because Harrison Ford doesn't need to yell. He doesn't need to make a scene. His presence alone is enough. His reputation, his body of work, his decades of professionalism, they all speak louder than any outburst ever could. Jimmy learned a hard lesson that night. You can't treat people like that, no matter who you are, no matter what platform you have. Respect matters. Kindness matters. And when you forget that, when you let your ego take over, you lose everything that actually matters. The show ended that night with Jimmy looking defeated. He said his goodnights to the audience, thanked the band, and walked off his own stage looking smaller than he did when the show started. Because that's what happens when you try to tear down someone bigger than you. You don't bring them down to your level. You just show everyone how small you really are. Harrison Ford walked out of that studio the same legend he was when he walked in. Maybe even more so, because now everyone knew he wouldn't tolerate disrespect. Not even for a paycheck. Not even for publicity. He stood up for himself in the most dignified way possible, and that's something people don't forget. So that's what really happened that night. That's the story they don't want you to know. No corporate spin, no carefully crafted apologies, just the raw truth about what went down when Jimmy Kimmel pushed one of Hollywood's most respected actors too far. Remember to subscribe and hit that notification bell because we're bringing you more stories like this, more truth bombs, more behind-the-scenes moments that expose what really goes on in Hollywood. And drop a comment below telling us what you think. Was Harrison right to walk off? Should Jimmy have apologized? Let us know your thoughts on this absolute disaster of an interview, because at the end of the day, this wasn't just about one bad interview. This was about respect, about dignity, and about knowing when to stand up for yourself. Harrison Ford showed us all how it's done that night. With class, with grace, and with the quiet confidence of someone who knows exactly who they are and doesn't need anyone else's approval. That's the real story. That's what actually happened when Hollywood's biggest legend finally said enough is enough.